Howard Cosell has made it through everything. He stood up for Muhammad Ali when everyone else was against him. He was threatened with death because he advocated for civil rights. He fought for decades against irate fans and network bosses. He was impervious to harm. Then everything fell apart one night in September. During a football game, a single statement set off the largest scandal in broadcasting history. What did he say that promptly put an end to a legendary career? The response will take you by surprise, particularly when you find out who stood up for him. Born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, on March 25, 1918, Howard Cosell was born Howard William Cohen. In order to avoid persecution and pursue a better life in America, his parents, who were Jewish immigrants, left Eastern Europe. Isidore, his father, was an accountant by profession. Nellie, his mother, did not leave the house. Howard's destiny was influenced by their idea that education was the only path out of adversity. The family didn't spend much time in North Carolina. They relocated to Brooklyn, New York, before Howard turned 3. Brooklyn was packed with immigrants attempting to start over, noisy, and crowded. Howard developed his piercing tongue and unwavering confidence there. Howard argued verbally, while other children used fists. He read books, cited them in class, and never backpedaled in a heated argument. He was shrewd, arrogant, and always prepared for a surprise attack. His ego had already begun to take shape and continued to grow. As he got older, Howard began to realize how powerful identity is. He made a decision both personally and professionally while attending NYU for law school in the late 1930s. Cosell became his last name instead of Cohen. Prior to its alteration at Ellis Island, he claimed it was derived from his grandfather's original Polish name. It was more than simply familial pride that led to the name change. In a field where having a Jewish name could be a hindrance, it was also about making a statement. Cosell was determined not to fit in. He desired for others to remember him. At Brooklyn's Alexander Hamilton High School, Howard was elected sports editor of the student newspaper. He wasn't a fluff writer even then. His writing was incisive and audacious. A few pupils detested him. A few educators held him in high regard. However, he was impossible to ignore. He had no qualms about criticizing poor performance or coaching. At the age of 16, he was already behaving like the gruff broadcaster he would grow up to be. By the age of 21, Cosell had graduated from NYU with a law degree and a bachelor's degree in English literature. It was uncommon. He was intelligent, motivated, and quick. Success, however, was insufficient. A steady employment wasn't all he wanted. He wanted recognition, power, and a voice. His folks were pleased. However, the passion that was motivating their son was beyond their comprehension. Cosell enlisted in the United States when World War II began. Army. At the port of embarkation in New York, he was a Transportation Corps major from 1942 until 1945. It was a great deal of responsibility. He played a part in planning the transfer of supplies and soldiers across the Atlantic. A single error could cause entire missions to be delayed. However, Cosell prospered. Being one of the youngest officers in his position, he acquired his rank early. He knew how to get things done, was efficient, and remained composed. His ability to handle power and pressure was demonstrated by that work. Howard met Corporal Mary Edith Emmy Abrams, a WAC sergeant, while he was assigned to New York. It was illegal for officers to date enlisted people at the time. Cosell didn't care, though. He went directly to a general and requested authorization. Both guts and paperwork were needed for that move. The general, however, gave his approval. Her family, who were devout Presbyterians, had misgivings about Howard and Emmy's relationship, but they continued to date. Even when he was in love, Cosell didn't let regulations stop him. While he was still in the Army, they were married in 1944. A Brooklyn judge's chambers served as the venue for the wedding. Before Emmy passed away in 1990, they were married for 46 years. Following the conclusion of the war, Cosell went back to New York and established a Manhattan legal business. He soon established a list of notable clients, including Willie Mays, the baseball great. He made between $25,000 and $30,000 a year, which at the time was a substantial income. But he immediately felt something growing inside of him. He felt stuck, even in his legal practice. It was not fun for him. In his office, he would pace while narrating fictitious sports games or giving speeches to juries. It was considered odd by friends. It was necessary, he believed. A journalist previously remarked that he didn't have enough mediocrity to make it in the industry. Something louder and more public was what he needed. And it came to him over sports radio. The first significant break for Howard Cosell came in 1953. He was asked to present a brief program on WABC in New York by Hal Neal of ABC Radio. It was an easy concept. Players from Major League Baseball would be interviewed by Little League children. Even though he would not receive payment, Cosell consented. In addition to doing the radio show on the side, he continued to practice law during the day. He made not a single dollar from it for nearly 3 years. He was unconcerned, though. He viewed it as an entrance. Despite the lighthearted and entertaining nature of the event, Cosell began to learn more. One instance jumped out. Hank Bauer, an outfielder for the Yankees, made light of his manager Casey Stengel while on the air. That minor mistake made headlines. Cosell witnessed the impact that spontaneous, genuine dialogue may have. He discovered that individuals frequently told the truth if you just let them speak. It stayed with him. A new sports program needed a sponsor, and Cosell was later challenged by ABC President Robert Pauley to find one. Cosell seized the opportunity. He started speaking of sports after securing a sponsor. The duration of that show would be decades. Cosell was reaping the rewards of his hard work and keen intuition. He was no longer just a host. He was beginning to influence the way that sports tales were reported. Cosell had had enough of being cautious by 1956. After doing occasional interviews, he joined ABC Radio as a full-time sports reporter. In those days, most sportscasters were kind. They steered clear of contentious or personally intimate topics and asked straightforward inquiries. Cosell, however, stormed in. He questioned a player directly in an early interview if his teammates shunned him because he shot too frequently. They weren't accustomed to that. He continued to press. He paid close attention to each response, and if he suspected something was being withheld, he always followed up. Some people detested that fashion. Others held it in high regard. Because they trusted him, Cosell was selected for interviews by athletes like Tommy Smith, who delivered the Black Power salute during the 1968 Olympics. They were certain that he would give them free speech and take their opinions seriously. Trust was important. Cosell gained notoriety throughout time for one item. He was straight. He didn't behave in an encouraging manner. He wasn't there to defend the reputations of sportsmen or to praise them. He criticized inappropriate behavior. He chastised subpar work. Despite being ordered to limit his conversation to sports, he brought up issues like racism, politics, and war. Some admirers adored him. People detested him. But he was not disregarded. As the conscience of American sports broadcasting, he was dubbed the most despised person in sports. His voice became memorable due to its clear tone and quick rhythm. The phrase, "This is Howard Cosell telling it like it is," has been ingrained in people's thoughts. He also had a relationship with Muhammad Ali. He was known to the world as Cassius Clay in 1964. But the majority of people didn't accept it when he came forward and announced his new name, Muhammad Ali. He was referred to as Clay in the papers. TV hosts did not mention Ali. The retaliation was severe and immediate. However, one man, Howard Cosell, rose up and clearly called his name. He was referred to as Muhammad Ali by Cosell on national television. The fact that millions were upset didn't bother him. The hate messages that flooded his mailbox didn't bother him. He thought Cosell was not going to give up on Ali's right to be himself. He understood what it was like to be an outsider. Cosell, a Jewish child from Brooklyn who had experienced bullying because of his heritage, was aware of discrimination. He supported Ali despite the fact that it endangered his own career because of this. "I'll call him whatever he wants," he added, adding that it's his name. Everything was altered by that one choice. There was more to it than boxing. It has to do with bravery, respect, and identity. From that point on, a friendship that went beyond sports united Ali and Cosell. And then there was 1967. The Vietnam War was in full swing. They were drafting thousands of young men. Muhammad Ali replied no, refusing to take part in a conflict in which he had no faith. It violated his faith, he stated. Moreover, he would not murder anyone who had never hurt him. It was a quick punishment. His license to box was revoked. He was not allowed to be in the ring. They took his title away from him. The majority of the media sided with him. They accused him of being a traitor and a coward. Cosell, however, did not. He declared the government's actions to be unlawful and inhumane while on broadcast. Punishing Ali for his views was immoral, he claimed. Advertisers threatened to remove their adverts. Networks cautioned him to be silent. Cosell did not, however, recoil. When no one else would, he spoke. The double standard was evident to him. Unpunished were wealthy white draft dodgers. However, youthful, black, and fearless Ali was set as an example. Cosell made a strong statement about it. Once more, the hate mail came back. This time, however, it simply made their friendship stronger. They were more than just boxers and broadcasters. Standing against a storm were two men. Then there was the enchantment they produced on screen. Cosell glowed on TV screens for almost 20 years. Interviews with them were like sparring contests. Ali would make light of Cosell's hairpiece, chuckle at his lofty rhetoric, and make a joking vow to knock him out. He would roll his eyes, Cosell. Respond with irony and question Ali about everything. They constantly engaged the audience with their arguments, jokes, and teasing of one another. It was not just for amusement. It was an exchange of ideas between equals, brutally honest but always polite. "Every time you open your mouth, you should be arrested for air pollution," Ali yelled once. Cosell replied, "You'd still be in poverty if I hadn't made you." It was bold, funny, raw. But beneath the jokes, they admired each other. They trusted each other. They knew the cameras couldn't fake that kind of bond. When Ali was banned from boxing and almost forgotten by the world, Cosell didn't forget. While others turned their backs, Cosell opened his studio doors. He kept inviting Ali on air. They talked about his faith, his decision to stay out of the war, his dreams, his fears. In one interview at the Houston Astrodome, you could see the sweat on Ali's face after a hard workout. But Cosell didn't ask about the fight. He asked about the man. And people listened. Ali wasn't a villain anymore. He was a human being. And Cosell helped make that happen. Then came the night in 1973. Joe Frazier was in the ring with George Foreman. Millions were watching. Round after round, Frazier hit the canvas. And Cosell's voice rang through TVs across the world. 3 simple words, shouted 3 times, "Down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier." It was raw emotion. It was disbelief. And it became the most famous call in boxing history. People still quoting. Still laugh about it, and still feel it. That night, Cosell didn't just narrate a fight. He captured a moment in time, a moment that proved sport wasn't just about who won. It was about what we felt watching it. And no one made us feel like Cosell did. Ali would later say that Cosell gave him a voice when no one else would listen. Cosell once said that Ali helped him become more than just a broadcaster. He became part of the story. Together, they pushed America to confront race, religion, war, and identity. Not with anger, but with words, with dignity, and with courage. In 1970, ABC executive Roone Arledge made a decision that changed American television forever. He hired Howard Cosell to be part of the new Monday Night Football broadcast team. This was a complete gamble. Cosell wasn't a former football player. He wasn't even a traditional sports broadcaster. He was loud, opinionated, and had a voice that demanded attention. Enraged didn't want bland commentary. He wanted sparks, and that's exactly what Cosell brought. The NFL wasn't happy. For years, the league had insisted on approving who sat in the broadcast booth. Enraged said no. He stood firm, refusing to let the league control his team. And it paid off. Ratings jumped 50% in that first season. Viewers were hooked, not just on football, but on the show around the game. The following year, in 1971, Enraged made another bold move. He replaced respected announcer Keith Jackson with Frank Gifford. Gifford had never done play-by-play before. But he was a football star with a calm, likable presence. Enraged wasn't looking for experience. He was building a trio. Cosell brought the drama. Don Meredith added humor. And now Gifford would balance them out. It worked. Ratings soared again. ABC was charging $65,000 for a single ad minute during the game, a massive sum for the time. This trio didn't just change football coverage, they redefined what live sports could be on television. They weren't just announcers, they were part of the show. What kept people watching wasn't just the games, it was the sparks flying between Cosell and Meredith. Cosell's sharp tone and Meredith's relaxed humor created a tension that was impossible to ignore. They argued on air, they teased each other. Once in 1974, they were both suspected of being a little drunk on live TV. The audience didn't care. They loved it. People started picking sides. Team Cosell or Team Meredith. Bars and living rooms buzzed with debate. And Enraged encouraged it. He knew conflict made good television. The show didn't feel scripted. It felt real. And that made it unforgettable. Cosell also had a voice that turned simple moments into events. One phrase in particular became iconic: he could go all the way. It was dramatic. It was slow. It was pure Cosell. He didn't just describe the action. He turned it into a story. Sometimes he'd even tell personal details about a player's life before delivering the line. It wasn't just a touchdown. It was a triumph. The phrase became so popular that other broadcasters started copying it. Chris Berman made it part of his act on ESPN. Today, the phrase still shows up in highlight reels and comedy sketches. It wasn't just a catchphrase. It was a symbol of how Cosell brought entertainment into the booth. But Cosell wasn't loved by everyone. His public feud with sports columnist Dick Young became legendary. Young called him names in print, like Howie the Fraud, and even tried to sabotage his interviews by shouting obscenities during tapings. It was personal. It was loud. And it was symbolic. Young represented the old world of newspapers. Cosell was the face of television. They weren't just fighting each other. They were fighting for the future of sports media. Cosell fired back just as hard, calling Young a right-wing cultural illiterate. Their war of words played out in columns, on air, and even in locker rooms. It wasn't just ego. It was a clash between two worlds that were quickly moving in different directions. Cosell also had friction with fellow broadcasters. One of them was Chris Economaki, a legend in motorsports coverage. Economaki once said Cosell had the biggest ego he'd ever seen. Their conflict wasn't about ratings, it was personal. Cosell held grudges. After Economaki made a minor mistake during an interview, Cosell brought it up again and again. Even a simple introduction at a Christmas party set him off. He didn't forget slights, no matter how small, and people around him noticed. Working with Cosell could be exhausting, but his presence always drew attention. That mix of brilliance and conflict became part of his mystique. Another famous critic was Jimmy Cannon. He took aim at Cosell in print, mocking his toupee and his name change from Cohen to Cosell. Cannon didn't just attack the broadcaster, he questioned the man himself. He called Cosell fake. saying he was all performance. He even joked that if Cosell were a sport, he'd be roller derby. The insult stuck. Cosell's look and voice made him a target for parody. But that didn't stop him. In fact, it made him even more famous. Critics fueled his legend. He was controversial, he was combative, and he didn't mind. In fact, Cosell openly criticized the trend of hiring former athletes as broadcasters. He called it jockocracy. He believed the job should go to people who trained for it, not just people who played the game. That put him at odds with co-hosts like Gifford and Meredith. He didn't hide his opinion. He said ex-players lacked insight and depth. It was a risky stance. Viewers liked seeing familiar faces, but Cosell stuck to his view. He believed sports commentary should be thoughtful and informed, not just casual conversation. His criticism sparked real debate about what sports broadcasting should be. He didn't win many friends with that attitude, but he did make people think. Howard Cosell was loud, proud, and often over the top on television. But behind the scenes, he was a quiet man who didn't want to go anywhere without his wife, Emmy. Her real name was Mary Edith Abrams. They got married in 1944 and stayed together for 46 years. Howard once told a reporter, "I wouldn't even cross the Triborough Bridge without Emmy." He meant it. Emmy followed him everywhere, games, events, interviews. People in the industry knew how close they were. Even his daughters said he couldn't function without her. She gave him balance. After she died in 1990, everything changed. His health got worse. His spirit faded. Within a year, he had surgery to remove a tumor. 2 years later, he left broadcasting for good. People who only knew the tough version of Cosell on TV were stunned by how broken he was without her. That side of him, the quiet love and dependence, had always been hidden behind the noise. At home, Howard was nothing like the man people saw on camera. The shouting, the arguments, the fast talking. That was all part of the job. In private, he was calm. He was gentle. He had 2 daughters, Jill and Hillary, and he loved reading them poetry from Keats and Shelley. On walks, he recited lines softly. He played card games with neighbors. He rarely raised his voice. Emmy kept him grounded. She was the only person who could calm him down when he got too worked up. Hillary once said he couldn't live without her, and it showed. He was always softer around his grandchildren, too. He was never the mouth that roared at home. Instead, he was thoughtful, humble, and deeply attached to his family. That version of Howard was real, but most people never saw it. While Cosell was building his career, he started drinking. Monday Night Football brought fame and stress, and sometimes too much vodka. On November 23, 1970, in freezing Philadelphia, he drank several martinis before going on air. During the live broadcast, he slurred the word Philadelphia and called it Philadelphia. Then he vomited right on Don Meredith's cowboy boots. He had to leave the booth. Viewers were shocked. But it wasn't the only time. People at ABC said he often drank before, during, and after shows. In 1984, during the baseball playoffs, Al Michaels had enough. He told Cosell to his face, "You're ruining the fucking telecast." It became a serious problem. The network didn't know what to do. Ratings were still high. But Cosell's behavior made him unpredictable. His drinking became part of his legacy, something fans remember as clearly as his voice. Under all the confidence, Cosell was insecure. Deep down, he was afraid people didn't like him. That fear drove him. He fought with co-hosts, challenged sports officials, and argued with executives. But it wasn't always about truth. Sometimes, it was about proving he belonged. He once said that only Frank Sinatra got more negative press than he did. He constantly asked producers if others were turning against him. He worried about being replaced. The bold opinions and sharp words were often a shield. He needed to be seen. He needed to be respected. And when he wasn't, it cut deep. People thought he was arrogant. But many of his outbursts came from fear, not pride. One of Cosell's most unforgettable moments came on December 8, 1980. During the final minute of a football game between the Dolphins and the Patriots, he got word that John Lennon had been shot and killed outside his apartment in New York. Cosell paused. He didn't want to say it on air. His co-host, Frank Gifford, told him he had to. So Cosell went live. He told millions of viewers, "It's just a football game, an unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News. John Lennon shot twice in the back, dead on arrival." It was quiet after that. People sat frozen in their homes. No one was expecting to hear that kind of news during a game. But it was a moment that showed how powerful television could be. Cosell wasn't just a sports announcer that night. He was the one who told America that one of its most loved voices was gone. On the night of September 5, 1983, millions of Americans sat in front of their TVs watching Monday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys and Washington Redskins were battling it out, and the atmosphere was electric. But what people remember most about that night had nothing to do with touchdowns or final scores. As Washington wide receiver Alvin Garrett darted through defenders, Howard Cosell made a comment that would end his career. He said, "That little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?" In just 6 words, Cosell sparked a national firestorm. Viewers were stunned. The phones at ABC lit up with complaints. By morning, newspapers and talk shows were tearing the moment apart. Cosell, a giant in sports broadcasting for decades, was suddenly at the center of one of the biggest controversies in television history. Reverend Joseph Lowery, president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, didn't wait to react. He called for a public apology, and he didn't just stop at Cosell. He sent telegrams to ABC executives demanding they take action. Lowery used the moment to highlight a larger issue. He pointed out the contrast between the number of black athletes on the field and the near-total absence of black voices in the broadcast booth. The backlash spread quickly. Radio shows, newspaper editorials, and TV panels exploded with debate. The demand for Cosell's firing grew louder with each passing hour. Cosell tried to control the damage. At first, he claimed he hadn't said "little monkey" at all. He said he only remarked that Garrett moved like one and meant it as a compliment to his agility. ABC tried to back him up, saying he wasn't talking about Garrett's appearance, but his quickness. But the tapes didn't lie. Journalists replayed the footage and confirmed what viewers had heard. Cosell had said the exact words being denied. This only made things worse. Instead of ending the controversy, the denials turned it into a scandal. Seal's credibility, once rock solid, began to crumble. Under pressure, Seal defended himself. He said, "Little monkey" was a phrase he'd used for years with no racial meaning. He pointed to earlier broadcasts, including a 1972 game where he called white player Mike Adamle a little monkey. In 1982, he used the same term for Glenn Hubbard, another white athlete. He even said he used it affectionately with his grandchildren. Supporters argued that Cosell's track record mattered. He had always spoken up for civil rights. He had defended Muhammad Ali when few others did, but none of that seemed to matter. Context was quickly buried under outrage. Then came a surprise. Some of Cosell's strongest defenders were black athletes and civil rights leaders. Jesse Jackson publicly supported him. Muhammad Ali stood by his side. And Alvin Garrett himself, the man Cosell had been describing, said he didn't find the comment offensive. Garrett explained, "I liked Howard Cosell. I didn't feel that it was a demeaning statement." But public opinion had already turned. The media had framed the story as a racial insult, and that version stuck. Even with all the support, Cosell couldn't escape the storm. The controversy took on a life of its own, one that didn't care about past friendships or good intentions. By the end of the 1983 season, Cosell was done. 13 years after helping reinvent Monday Night Football, he stepped away. He called the experience emotionally draining. It wasn't just the scandal that wore him down. He had grown disillusioned with the direction football and television were heading. His departure marked the end of an era. Cosell had once been a fearless voice, unafraid to challenge athletes, coaches, and even the leagues themselves. Now, a single sentence had ended it all. Though he continued on radio until 1992, his presence on TV was never the same. His personal life soon began to fall apart. In 1991, at age 73, he was diagnosed with cancer. Doctors found a tumor in his chest, and he went through surgery that June. At the same time, he was coping with the death of his wife, Emmy, who had been his partner and emotional anchor. Cosell tried to stay active on radio, but it was clear he was fading. By 1992, he retired for good. He spent his final years battling not only cancer, but heart disease, Parkinson's, and several minor strokes. Interviews from that time show a man full of regret. He felt like he had been pushed out before completing the work he started. The same voice that once shaped how America saw sports had gone quiet. The world barely noticed. On April 23, 1995, Howard Cosell died in New York at age 77. The cause was a heart embolism. News of his death brought mixed reactions. Some called him a legend and a pioneer, a man who made sports broadcasting smarter and bolder. Others remembered only the controversies, the arrogance, and the final downfall. There were glowing obituaries and sharp critiques. Some fans mourned, others shrugged. His legacy had been forever changed by that one night in 1983. Even so, the world didn't forget his contributions. In 1993, 2 years before his death, TV Guide named him the all-time best sportscaster. That same year, he entered the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. In 1994, he was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, although he was too ill to attend. More honors followed. In 1996, he received a posthumous Sports Emmy for Lifetime Achievement. He was also added to the American Sportscasters Hall of Fame and later the International Boxing Hall of Fame. These awards were a final recognition that, despite the scandal, Cosell had changed the game forever.